Okay, so once again, alleles are different forms of a gene, and I will give you way ahead of time, tell you that alleles are different proteins. So one protein or one allele creates one protein, and a different allele creates a different protein, and each of those proteins have different shapes, and so they have different functions inside your body, and one shape of a protein could lead to a tall plant, and a different shape of the same protein could lead to a short plant. You get one allele from each of your parents. So you get one allele from your mom, that comes in the egg from the mother, and you get one allele from the dad, and that comes from the sperm from your dad. And if you don't know, this is the symbol for female, and this is the symbol for male. I always remember it because the arrow reminds me that males have penises, and females don't have penises. So this would be the male, this would be the female. So you get one allele from dad and one allele from mom for a total of two alleles for each gene. So you get two alleles for height, two alleles for seed color, two alleles for seed shape, etc., etc., etc. And in human beings, we think there's as many as 15,000 different genes and therefore 15,000 different alleles. All right, so if you get your two alleles and they're the same, so if you got the small allele from dad and the small allele from mom, we call this homozygous. So if both of your alleles for a particular gene are identical, that would be called homozygous. And if the alleles from your parents, the one from dad and the one from mom, are different, so like big T and little t, tall and short, then we would call that heterozygous. So two of the alleles being the same homo, two being different, that's heterozygous. In addition, what Mendel started to figure out is he had all these plants over years and years, and he counted them and did great deals amounts of probability. He started to realize that with many, many genes, there were only two alleles, and one would usually win, and one usually didn't win. And so he called the ones that win dominant, which means that they're expressed if they're there, and you see that one. And he called the ones that lose recessive, and the only way you see a recessive allele is if you have two of them. So you got recessive from dad and recessive from mom, so you have two recessive. That's the only way you ever see this expression of that particular gene. Now there's some additional important words in here, because now that we know that you get two alleles, we have to know that the genotype is what are the two alleles. What are the two alleles? So there would always be two of them, so it could be, for example, big T is a genotype, little t, big T would be a genotype, little t would be a genotype, and for every different gene that you have, there would be different genotypes you could have, and if there's only two different possible alleles, then there would only be three possible genotypes. But then there's also something called phenotype, and phenotype is what it looks like. In other words, this is the gene that's expressed. So, as you already know, if you have big T, you're always going to have a tall plant, so it looks tall. If you have little t, the big T wins, so it looks tall. And if you have little t, there's no big T's there, so it looks short. So the phenotype is what it looks like, and the genotypes are the two alleles that that particular animal has. Now remember, for example, in human beings, if you have a mom and a dad, you would get an allele from mom, let's say it's big T, and an allele from dad, let's say it's little t. And what that means when I say you get that is that your mom has an eggy, which has one allele in it. And we'll learn in a little while when we learn meiosis why it only has one allele. And then the dude has a little sperm, and it has one allele. When you only have one allele, you have a special name. You're called a gamete. So if you only have one allele, you're called a gamete. So this would be a gamete, this would be a female gamete, and this would be a male gamete. So a sperm is a male gamete, and an eggy is a female gamete. They have sex with each other, the sperm enters the the fallopian tubes of the woman, and if the sperm is able to get into the egg, we now have one allele from dad and one allele from mom for every gene. This has now been fertilized. So it's a fertilized egg. It's no longer called the gamete. Now it's called a zygote because it has one allele from dad and one allele from mom, and so therefore it's called a zygote.